On July 19, 1973, a man stepped onto the set of Enter the Dragon, and by the end of that day, he would never be the same. His name was Raymond Cho, not the well-known producer from Golden Harvest. This was a different Raymond Cho, a stuntman, a street fighter, a man who had spent the last 15 years telling himself that Bruce Lee was overrated. A carefully designed image, a marketing creation built for Western audiences who didn't know any better. Raymond believed Bruce Lee was all camera angles and clever editing. He was wrong, and when he finally understood that, it was already too late. Raymond didn't vanish in some dramatic way. There was no accident splashed across newspapers, no violent scandal. What happened was far quieter than that, and far more final. The kind of ending that never makes headlines. The people who saw it knew better than to speak, and the people in charge of the production had every reason to keep it hidden. This is the part the movie never showed. This is what happened when the cameras stopped rolling. This is the story of the man who stood face to face with Bruce Lee and said the one sentence no one else dared to say. "You're nothing without the camera." Bruce heard him. He smiled, and he didn't respond. That silence unsettled everyone who witnessed it. It was heavier than shouting, more frightening than anger. To understand that moment, you have to picture Hong Kong in the summer of 1973. The city felt tense, alive, like something big was about to happen. On paper, the British still governed the territory, but in reality, power was divided. The docks were controlled by organized crime groups. The film business ran on tight budgets, fast schedules, and constant risk. And then there was Bruce Lee. He wasn't just another actor. He was something Hong Kong had never seen before and hasn't seen since. Less than 2 years earlier, The Big Boss had become a sensation. Then came Fist of Fury. After that, Way of the Dragon, each film bigger than the last. Now came Enter the Dragon, backed by Warner Bros. Money, directed by an American filmmaker, aimed at the global market. This wasn't simply another martial arts movie. It was history in the making. Everyone at Golden Harvest Studios knew it. This film wasn't just about Bruce Lee. It was about Hong Kong cinema finally stepping onto the world stage. It was about every Chinese actor who had been pushed into the background of Western films, told to stay silent and look mysterious. This was the turning point. And that is exactly why Raymond Cho hated it. Raymond Cho wasn't even his birth name. In Cantonese, he was called Cho Kin Man, roughly meaning the one who endures. His family saw that as a blessing. In hindsight, it sounded more like a warning. He was born in 1941 in Kowloon, the second son of a fish seller who worked the Aberdeen floating markets. Life was tough and simple. By the time Raymond was 8 years old, he believed 2 things without question. First, the world is split between those who take and those who are taken from. Second, he would never be one of the weak. He started fighting early, not in a traditional martial arts school with structured forms and disciplined breathing. He learned in alleys, on rooftops, in crowded streets. Fights without rules, without teachers, without second chances. The only thing that mattered was whether you were still standing when it was over. By his late teens, he was known in Kowloon. Not respected, feared. Shopkeepers closed their doors when he walked by. Parents called their children indoors. He was quick, ruthless, and constantly looking for someone better than him to challenge. That hunger to prove himself eventually led him into the film world. Not because he loved movies, he didn't. He joined because stunt work paid well, and stunt coordinators didn't ask many questions. If you could take a punch, fall without complaining, and show up on time, you had work. For 6 years, he worked as an extra.
He fell down staircases, crashed into props, charged in large battle scenes wearing historical costumes. He gave and received hits with the calm acceptance of someone who had grown used to pain. He was reliable, but not exceptional. And that was the problem. Raymond had spent his entire life being good in places where someone else was extraordinary. As a child, his older brother was the one teachers praised. On the streets, someone else was always tougher. In the stunt community, there were trained martial artists who moved with precision and control. Standing next to them, Raymond felt exposed, like a street brawler pretending to be something greater. He buried those feelings. He drank heavily, gambled his pay, picked fights in bars, always with men who couldn't truly hurt him, because he wasn't really angry at them. He was angry at what he lacked. Then Bruce Lee returned from America. The first time Raymond truly saw him move wasn't during filming, it was during a rehearsal at Golden Harvest. Raymond was waiting for his scene, bored and irritated about his daily pay. He leaned against a wall, smoking a cigarette, when he heard a strange sound. It wasn't the usual thud of staged punches. It was sharper, like air being sliced. Curious, he looked through a narrow gap in the partition wall. Bruce was practicing alone. No camera, no stunt partner, just him, striking at empty space. And in those few minutes, Raymond witnessed something that changed him. The first thing that hit him was the speed. People talked about Bruce Lee's speed all the time, but hearing about it was nothing compared to seeing him in person. His hands moved so fast, they seemed to vanish between starting point and finish, like watching film frames missing in the middle. But it wasn't only speed, it was control. Every strike had meaning, every step had intention. There was no wasted motion, no showmanship for the sake of appearance. It was pure efficiency, the body working at its highest level. Raymond had never seen anything like it. And instead of feeling inspired, he felt rage rising in his chest. Because in that instant, he understood something painful. This wasn't a myth. This wasn't clever editing. This wasn't a product built for marketing. This was real. And no matter how many street fights he won, he would never move like that.
Raymond had seen fast fighters before, but what he had never seen was purpose like this. Every punch Bruce threw meant something. Every turn of his body had a reason. There was no show, no wasted motion, no extra movement to impress anyone. It was pure efficiency, the most controlled, precise physical performance Raymond had ever witnessed. And instead of inspiring him, it made him furious. The anger came so suddenly that he stepped back from the crack in the wall and pressed himself flat against it, trying to steady his breathing. Because in that moment, the truth hit him like a blow to the chest. He would never be that. No number of bar fights, no backyard brawls, no years of crashing into tables as a stuntman. None of it would ever produce what he had just seen. Bruce Lee wasn't simply better at fighting. He was operating on a completely different level. The difference wasn't small, it was enormous, like comparing a thunderstorm to a man spraying water from a garden hose. Raymond lit another cigarette, smoked it down to the filter, then lit another. By the time his name was called back to set, he had made a decision. If Bruce Lee was extraordinary, then there had to be a crack somewhere. There always was. Every impressive man Raymond had ever met eventually showed a weak spot, a gap between image and reality, a seam you could press on. He just had to find it. It took him 4 months to get hired for Enter the Dragon. He called in favors, used contacts in the stunt department, showed up early, stayed late, made himself useful. He became the man who solved small problems before they turned into big ones. A prop that needed moving, Raymond handled it. A scheduling issue, he smoothed it out. A younger stuntman unsure about choreography,
Raymond guided him through it, quiet, reliable, invisible, until he wasn't. The first time Bruce Lee truly looked at him, not past him, not through him, was during the third week of filming Enter the Dragon. They were shooting in the stone courtyard that would later become one of the film's most famous scenes. Raymond was part of a group of fighters rushing down a corridor toward Bruce. The choreography was simple: run in, get taken down, fall. Raymond had done it hundreds of times in other films, but this time something inside him resisted. He rushed in slightly off-angle, and instead of offering the agreed target for Bruce to strike, he shifted his weight and threw a real punch. Not full force, not enough to injure, but real. The kind of punch only someone experienced would recognize instantly. Bruce recognized it. He deflected it with a movement so small most people wouldn't even see it. A subtle turn of his forearm, a slight shift of weight. That was all. Raymond's own momentum carried him 2 extra steps straight into the stone wall. He hit it hard enough to feel the impact in his teeth. "Cut," the director called. Filming resumed. No one said a word. But Bruce looked at him, really looked at him, before turning away. And as Raymond leaned against the wall, rolling his shoulder to ease the pain, he understood something. He had been noticed. It wasn't the kind of attention he wanted, but it was a beginning. The next morning, Raymond arrived 2 hours early. He told himself it was professionalism, that he wanted to review the fight sequences, that he was being dedicated. He had been lying to himself for decades. He knew it. The truth was simpler. He wanted to see Bruce Lee alone, before the cameras, before the crew, before the myth at Golden Harvest. What remained had to be just a man, muscle, bone, limits, the same limits everyone had. He needed to see Bruce Lee at 6:47 in the morning. He found him in the far corner of a rehearsal room, alone, just as expected. But what he saw was not what he had prepared himself for. Bruce wasn't stretching, wasn't shadowboxing, wasn't performing. He was sitting cross-legged on the concrete floor, back straight, eyes closed, completely still. No music, no movement, no audience. Just a man sitting in silence, solid and unmoving, like a stone resting at the bottom of a river, as if he had always been there, as if everything else in the room was temporary. Raymond cleared his throat. Bruce opened his eyes. No flinch, no surprise, just a calm, steady gaze, as if he'd known Raymond was there the entire time and was simply waiting. "You're early," Bruce said, not a question. "I wanted to review the routines," Raymond replied. Bruce studied him for a moment, then gave a small nod and closed his eyes again. That was it. Raymond walked to the other side of the room and began his warm-up. They didn't speak for an hour, but something had shifted. Raymond felt it with every stretch, every breath. He had stepped into a different kind of contest, one he didn't fully understand. The rules were unclear, and that, he began to realize, was the most dangerous thing about Bruce Lee. You never quite knew what game you were playing. Over the following weeks, the tension grew. Not openly. There were no arguments at lunch, no dramatic confrontations, no shouting in front of the crew. What happened between Raymond and Bruce existed in small moments, in the space between takes, in the way they stood near each other, in the fraction of a second when one watched the other without appearing to. Raymond began studying Bruce like a military strategist studies enemy territory, carefully, obsessively. He observed how Bruce treated the crew, warm, respectful, genuinely curious about people. Raymond had always believed that kind of behavior was fake. Now he wasn't sure. He watched how Bruce handled disagreements with director Robert Klaus. Bruce never raised his voice, never lost control. He made his case calmly, clearly, and somehow always achieved the result he wanted, not through force, but through precision of thought. And that, more than the speed, more than the strength, began to disturb Raymond the most.
What unsettled Raymond most wasn't Bruce's speed. It was how he treated people. Bruce Lee treated the stuntmen like human beings, not like background props, not like bodies to be thrown, kicked, and replaced. He learned their names. He asked about their families. If someone took a hard fall, Bruce was the first one there, kneeling beside them, checking carefully with the focus of someone who truly understood how much damage a body could take. He knew the limits because he had tested his own for years. Raymond had spent his entire career being invisible to the stars. That was the system. Actors lived in one world, stuntmen lived in another. The line between them was thin but firm. Bruce crossed that line as if it didn't exist, and watching this stirred something darker in Raymond. Not the fast-burning anger of a street fight. This was colder, older. The kind of resentment that builds slowly over decades until it has weight. Because Bruce had everything: talent, fame, money, respect from both the crew above him and the stuntmen below him. But more than all of that, he had something Raymond couldn't name at first: ease. Bruce moved through the world as if he belonged exactly where he was, as if he knew who he was, and that was enough. Raymond had spent his entire life chasing that feeling without realizing it. No amount of fighting had given it to him. No drinking, no winning. He hated Bruce for having it, and he hated himself for feeling that way. In that tense, bottled-up state, like a man who had been holding his breath for 30 years, Raymond made his first real mistake. It was a Thursday afternoon. Filming ended early because of a lighting issue. The crew scattered, some to the canteen, others to nearby food stalls setting up for the evening. The set felt hollow. Large spaces always feel different when the people leave, like the air is waiting. Raymond stayed behind in the main training area. He was practicing a spinning kick that had to land at a precise angle for the camera. He had tried it 40 times. Every attempt felt wrong. His hip alignment was slightly off. His foot placement hesitated in a way he couldn't fix. He didn't hear Bruce enter. The first sign he wasn't alone was a voice behind him. Calm, direct. Your weight is too far forward before the turn. Raymond froze and turned. Bruce stood about 3 meters away, still in training clothes. He wasn't glancing casually, he was watching carefully. That pulls your hips inward, Bruce continued. Lower your heel about 3 centimeters when you land. Let the turn come from the floor, not your hips. In another moment, from another man, that would have been generosity, professional advice. But Raymond had leaned too far forward in every way that mattered his entire life. He had no room left for kindness, especially from Bruce. I didn't ask, Raymond replied. Bruce didn't react with offense or anger. He simply looked at him, present, steady. I've been watching you, Raymond said. The words came out before he could stop them, months of pressure finally breaking. I know, Bruce said calmly. That caught Raymond off guard for half a second. You're good on camera, Raymond added, letting the meaning hang in the air. Only on camera. Performance, not reality. Myth, not truth. Bruce looked at him for a long moment. Then he said quietly, Show me what you've got. No challenge in his tone, no anger, just an invitation. Raymond should have walked away. He didn't. Without the camera, you're nothing, he said, almost gently, as if stating a simple fact. The training room went silent. 2 stuntmen in the corner were working with wire equipment. They didn't visibly react, but they stopped, the way animals freeze when the atmosphere changes. Bruce heard the words. Raymond studied his face, searching for the crack, the moment the legend would fall away and reveal an ordinary man. Bruce smiled. Not the public smile, not the promotional grin, a small, private smile. Then he said nothing. He removed his training shirt and folded it carefully,
placed it neatly on an equipment box, rolled his neck once slowly. And when he looked back at Raymond, his expression was the same calm focus Raymond had seen weeks earlier in that silent room. And in that instant, Raymond felt it. The cold realization of a man who has just stepped off a cliff and hasn't yet started falling. He had misjudged this completely. Bruce didn't need the camera needed him. What followed lasted about 40 seconds. Raymond knew because he counted later, lying flat on his back, staring at the ceiling, doing math to avoid thinking. 40 seconds. The shortest fight of his life. Except it wasn't a fight. A fight requires two people exchanging force. This wasn't an exchange. It was a statement. Bruce made it. Raymond received it. That was all. Raymond attacked with the spinning kick, the very move Bruce had tried to correct. He came in fast, carrying years of anger behind it, the kind of strike that had ended real fights, the kind that had sent men to the hospital. He never landed it. Bruce didn't simply dodge. He wasn't reacting. He moved before the kick arrived, like water shifting before a stone hits its surface, like something operating on a different sense of time. And suddenly, Raymond was on the floor. He didn't even understand how. There had been contact, brief and precise, not a crushing blow, more like a correction, 2 points of pressure at once, controlled, exact. Then the concrete met his back, hard. The two stuntmen in the corner remained frozen, equipment in hand, bodies still. Their instinct had already decided, do not get involved, do not become part of this. Raymond lay there longer than the moment required. Bruce crouched beside him, not towering over him, beside him, the posture of someone checking on another person, not claiming victory. Your weight was too far forward, Bruce said quietly. The same words as before, no sarcasm, no triumph, just instruction. Then he stood, picked up his shirt, and walked out. Raymond stayed on the floor. Eventually, the two stuntmen resumed their work with careful casualness. Equipment lifted, wires adjusted. No one looked directly at him. And in that silence, Raymond understood something final. He hadn't challenged a myth. He had tested himself against reality. And reality had answered.
Raymond stayed on the floor for a long time, staring at the ceiling. He replayed everything carefully, like a man performing an autopsy on his own beliefs. For 30 years, he had built his life around one idea. It was the foundation under everything he did. That idea was simple. Talent isn't real. In his mind, remarkable people were just ordinary people dressed up with better lighting, better angles, better stories. Strip away the camera, the music, the praise, and every man was the same. Bone, muscle, hunger, desperation, just like him. He had tested that belief against Bruce Lee, and it had collapsed. Bruce wasn't performing greatness. He had taken the same raw materials every human has, time, discipline, attention, will, and shaped them into something Raymond couldn't explain. It wasn't the fake talent Raymond used to dismiss. It wasn't just working harder. It was something else, something Raymond didn't even have a word for. When Bruce moved, Raymond felt the distance between them physically. Not the gap between a good fighter and a better fighter, a different category entirely. And the worst part? Bruce had known. He had known when he offered the correction, known when Raymond rejected it, known when Raymond tried to crack the myth with his insult. And he hadn't been angry. That was the most devastating part of all. Raymond's contempt hadn't even been a threat. It had been treated like the certainty of a man who was very wrong and very convinced, with patience, with calm, with quiet demonstration. Raymond was 42 years old,
For 4 decades, he had been the most dangerous man in every room he entered. His identity depended on that fact. Bruce walked in and switched off the power. Raymond didn't return to the set for 2 days. He called in complaining about his shoulder, which truly was injured from the fall. The lie had enough truth to pass. He stayed in his rented room in Kowloon, drank steadily but not wildly, thought without distractions. He thought about his father at the fish market, about his older brother, the praised one who had died at 19 from tuberculosis, taking with him the rival Raymond had quietly competed against his whole life. He thought about the rooftop fights, the bar fights, the years spent making himself useful and invisible in rooms that didn't particularly care about him. Most of all, he thought about the one belief he had trusted completely, that extraordinary men were performing, that the gap wasn't real. It wasn't slightly wrong, it was structurally wrong. And that realization changed the shape of his life. He should have stayed home, finished his contract quietly, collected his pay, and walked away from Enter the Dragon with whatever pride he could salvage. He knew that. On the 3rd day, he went back anyway. Raymond Chow died in the spring of 2004. It was a Tuesday morning before harbor traffic had begun. His landlady found him in his chair by the window, facing west toward the water. He looked peaceful, not distressed, not dramatic, just finished. He was 62 years old. He had outlived Bruce Lee by 31 years. There was no family, no final speech, just a small apartment with simple furniture and a shelf of philosophy books. On his desk was a photograph, not framed, not displayed with ceremony, just standing there from habit. A still from Enter the Dragon, Bruce frozen mid-motion in a corridor, captured by a camera that could never fully hold what it was trying to record. On the back, in Raymond's handwriting, "He was right. Carry on." The police officer who filed the report didn't understand the meaning. The landlady, old enough to recognize the image, said nothing. Some stories belong only to those who lived them. Enter the Dragon was released on July 26, 1973. Bruce Lee never saw it. He died 6 days earlier at just 32 years old. The film earned $36 million worldwide. It reshaped American cinema. It made Bruce Lee a household name across cultures and languages, not just as a fighter or an actor, but as a symbol of what a human being could become. He represented possibility, proof that the distance between ordinary and extraordinary is not a battle, it's a direction. Raymond spent the next 31 years walking in that direction, not dramatically, not publicly, slowly, quietly. He never closed the gap, but he never stopped moving toward it either, because in the end, that was the real lesson. The camera did not create Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee made the camera matter. And every morning, in a small apartment in Aberdeen, an aging man arose before dawn and practiced, not for attention, not for applause, not to prove anything to anyone, but because movement was the only honest answer he had found to the question that changed his life. What do you do when you discover the extraordinary is real? You stop trying to deny it, and you get to work.